This is the external mic check. Make sure this works well. How about from this angle? Does it work as well as this angle? As long as we angle it this way, we'll be okay. All right. Are we? Yep. Okay. We're recording. It always feels weird as shit to start, so we'll just do it.
Let's just start.
And it feels weird because you're not really talking to anybody. This is when you do it alone, but then you're like, welcome back to the Multiverse, welcome to the Hotbox. We're here with Reuben Dean Young.
Hello.
Been friends since high school. Don't see enough of each other anymore, I would say. Should definitely hang out more. But definitely have to have you back for other discussions about government, God, and all that stuff. But today, I just want to know about your experiences with psychedelics and mainly DMT.
Yes.
Because that's so damn interesting. The first time I ever had any experience with psychedelics was when I guess I shouldn't say people's names, but me and a friend of ours, we took mushrooms at the Stonehenge golf course when I was 18, I guess. And that wasn't the first time I'd done it, but it was the first time I had tripped. I'd eaten mushrooms, it didn't do a thing, which was not the first time that happened to me. And so we're laying there. I remember we're just laying in the grass. I'm just going to have to say his name for the story. Me and Neil are laying in the grass, and when I know it starts to kick in is when I'm sitting beside this big bush, and I start to get really scared that there is the creature from Jeepers Creepers in the bush. And I turn to Neil and I'm like, what if the thing from Jeepers Creepers is watching us from this bush? And he's like, why the fuck would you say that? So we move away from the bush and we go sit down, and when we lay back down, I look back at the bush, and this is like so my first trip, just to let you know, was like the most hardcore, like with hallucinations, with visual hallucinations I've ever had.
Your first one?
My first one was I've had like harder trips with like the way it made me feel.
Yeah.
I don't know. This one was hardcore right off the bat. So I look over at this bush and it's just getting bigger and smaller. Like the shadow of the bush is just like expanding, just waving. And I look up at the sky. And I ask Neil if he sees the same thing, and he says he does. And then we lay back in the grass and I look at the sky, and the clouds are getting bigger and smaller, like they're breathing down on me. It feels like they're coming within like 100 yards of me and then going way back up in the sky. And I'm already like, this drug is amazing.
Off of mushrooms.
Yeah. So, like, I've never been able to recreate this level of like visual hallucinations. So that's why it feels weird when I tell people about it, because some people, even that have tripped, don't really like believe me, because there's like such hardcore hallucinations. But the stars in the sky are swirling in big circles and shit. We start to leave the golf course because we want to go over to Jackie's house where she's having a party. And we like walk through the golf course, and there's a tree in the distance that looks like it's walking towards us. And we have to be like, no fucking way. We can approach this thing, it's not gonna fucking attack us. And then in the distance, one of those cell phone towers with the blinking lights flashes, so it's like white, red. And I'm like, what the fuck was that? And Neil's like, I think some stars just exploded. Like, we are deep in, like 45 minutes in, we're going crazy already. And it flashes again, I'm like, oh my god, it's a fucking cell phone tower. So we chill out a bit, get in his car, and we're like, all right, we have like 100 yards to drive to Jackie's. We can do that. We can handle this. We get in and we go down that hill that goes from, near my old house, Jackie's house, go down that little hill by the golf course. And I felt like I lifted out of my seat in the car, and like I was just flying through the air for a second. I screamed with happiness the whole way there, already like celebrating how great mushrooms are, just like how wonderful this feeling is. And then I get to Jackie's, and I really only remember flashes of hallucinations from that point. I'm sitting there with Shiflet, and I hold up a glass of water. I'm like, me and Neil are the only ones tripping at this party. Yeah. Everyone else is just hanging out. I hold up a glass of water, and I'm like, is this water level changing? Did I say that right? Is this water level changing? And he was like, nope, that water is staying still. And I was like, to me, it looks like it's going way up to the top and then way down to the bottom. And he's like, well, you are on mushrooms. That's what happens. And he, like, Shiflet just talked me through shit for a while, where I'd be like, I feel like the shadows on your face are becoming like permanent. And he's like, nope, nope. That's not happening.
That's good.
I talked to this French exchange student, didn't realize that he was a French exchange student, sitting there talking forever, and then finally realized they're not understanding anything I'm saying. And the final thing I really remember, and this is, people that know me well have heard this 1,000 times, but it's it's probably my favorite thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I go in the bathroom to pee, and it felt like the force of me peeing was making me blast off of the ground, and I fell against the wall behind me, and I was going, whoa, whoa, as I peed all over Jackie's toilet and floor. But I'm laughing hysterically, and my viewpoint, I'm tripping so hard that my viewpoint makes me think that I am up in the corner, in the ceiling, peeing down on the toilet. And I'm going, oh my God, because the force made me just feel, and I guess I lifted up on my toes, so I did feel like the sensation of rising, but I felt like I was blasting off of the earth. And then I go home, and I stood outside of my parents' bedroom door for probably a solid 10 minutes debating whether I should wake them up and tell them how great mushrooms are or not. It was like, I think I need to fucking knock on this door.
I think I need to tell them something.
And then I was like, okay, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should just dose them. Maybe you should put it on some pizza sometime. They're like, no, you should not do that. So that was my first fucking psychedelic experience. What was yours like? Do you remember?
I've been trying to think of what the first time was. I think it was LSD when we were all hanging out at Rachel's one day. I think that was my first one.
Was that like 10th grade? 11th grade?
It was so long ago.
Yeah, no idea.
It was in there.
What was it like?
9th grade.
Do you remember it at all? Or let's say, do you remember, since that was like my strongest one, do you remember your strongest?
That was the first one that like I really remember. We all dosed up and got in Duffy's car. we all crammed. There was like 4 of us, plus Duffy driving. We all crammed in his little...
Isn't it great to have a friend like Scott Duffy that's like, doesn't do a thing, doesn't do anything illegal at all. So it's like that was Kyle Irely, do you remember him? Well, he went to high school with us, and Kyle was my like dude that didn't do a thing, nothing illegal. So it's like anytime you're doing something bad, Kyle can drive for
you. We all crammed in the back of his little hatchback Civic, and Duffy just started blasting this Pink Floyd album. And the only thing I really remember from it, I think we drove around Smoke Tree for like an hour, but I was in the back just staring up at the stars through the the hatchback glass. That's really all I remember from that one. But
what was so that was on acid. I've only done acid one time.
Really?
Yeah, because I did not fucking enjoy myself at all.
I've only had a bad experience once, and it was at a festival, and it really only lasted for... It felt like it lasted a long time, but...
Yeah.
I think it only lasted for 20 or 30 minutes.
Once you have enough experience, you can be like, this will pass in
a
while. But when it first happens to you, you're like, this is going to last forever.
That was the only bad...
What happened there? Like,
part of a trip I've ever had. I was at Allgood with my girlfriend at the time, and we were just sitting on the side of a mountain watching some band play. I forget who it was, but... We recording?
Yeah, just checking.
But this guy started talking to her, and I guess I got like insecure and started just like thinking stupid bad stuff.
And then just spiraling down with that stupid shit.
It like snowballed, and I just got really angry at this guy, and it made me so uncomfortable because it had never happened to me before. But it was like I think I had done LSD probably, I don't know, more than a handful of times before that, and this was the first time it's ever like
gone poorly.
Yeah.
Mine have never been like where something overtly bad happened other than just me eating too much. Well, the LSD trip, the one acid trip I had, the reason I've never done it again is because, like, I didn't have any visual hallucinations, really. The strongest thing that happened to me from it was when I came back. Excuse me, I burped. But so I ate it at a friend's house, and then was sitting there watching Jeopardy with him, and I kept trying to talk to him, and after a while he was like, "Hey, dude, I really just want to watch Jeopardy in silence," and I was like. And I'd been tripping for like 20 minutes at this point, and I wanted to like talk about how crazy I felt.
Yeah.
And he's like, can we just be quiet and watch Jeopardy? So I was like, okay, I have to leave then. I can't fucking,
Yeah.
I tried to be quiet, and it just felt like all this energy was building up inside of me, and I was freaking out. So I get on my bike, and I go back to me and Neil's apartment. It's when we lived at the townhouse, Georgetown apartments. And like, I walk in and tell him what's up, and he smiles, and he's like, I can take care of you. And he's like, lay down on the bed. He's like, lay down on your bed. So I laid flat on it, on my back. And then he put on, I can't remember what it was. It was probably Jimi Hendrix or something. He was especially into that at the time. And it was a song that, like, just built up over, like, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, what I want you to do is close your eyes and just let yourself feel this song.
Yeah.
So I close my eyes, and the music builds up, and I literally feel my body start to rise up in the air. Because I have my eyes closed, I can't anchor myself visually.
That's when, like, from my experiences, the strongest the hallucinations are. Like, I've never really had a super intense hallucination.
Like open eye?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think the only time I've actually, like, seen stuff, like, dramatically change, I was at a show, or I was at this little night-long festival in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
It was called Starscape. And it was right on this harbor. And it was right before it got dark. It was just starting to get dark, but there was this huge storm front rolling in. And I was out, like, probably 60 yards out on this dock.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just sitting out on the very front of the dock, like all the waves around me. It was probably pretty deep. But you see the storm front coming in, and the clouds were all like sharp swirls, and
that's awesome.
It was just a huge, like, black, awesome looking.
Man, I would have loved to have seen
thing
that.
Of clouds.
Yeah.
That was probably the best open-eyed visual I've ever experienced.
I've never really tried to do, like, closed eye stuff. I don't know why. Like, as much as I've eaten mushrooms, I need to, like, stop just looking around me.
Yeah,
and try to go
you get kind of
inward,
lost.
Maybe. Yeah.
In the fun of it. Like, you don't want to sit down and experiment.
Well, yeah. Well, I think that's a fucking important thing to do, is to sit down and experiment.
Yeah.
Like, I don't necessarily believe in God or heaven and stuff like that, but I do feel like when you take this stuff, it accesses something that you can't normally fucking get to. And you see stuff, like my second strongest mushroom trip, I was out in Powhatan at this guy Ben's house. So we had like acres and acres of just land to ourselves. You know, woods and this long dirt road that led to a place where they had cleared out some trees because they were going to build a little shack. And they had piled up the trees in this big thing. And that night at like 4 a.m, I'm standing about 50 yards away from the pile. And I'm seeing little green eyes, like, in the fucking pile. This is, now when I've eaten mushrooms, it's been a while, but, like, more recently, it's only been, like, a gram that I'll eat just to, like, you know, just feel a little bit of something. Mm-hmm. Back then, it was like, let's go fucking deep and see what happens.
Eat an eighth.
So, yeah, just eat a full eighth and be like, does anyone else have a little bit more? And then sit there and hallucinate so hard that I'm seeing little fucking green eyes.
So they weren't really there?
Not at all. And I'm talking to these aliens that I think are in this fucking pile. And I'm kind of doing a circle around it, and I'm just being like directly talking to them, but like kind of whispering, but knowing that they could hear me. And I'm like, you shouldn't just hide in there. Like, let's talk if you're over there. Come on out. Like, if you traveled all the way here, why aren't we talking? I'm a smart guy. And then my friend Drew, who had walked up behind me and didn't know, you know, I'm whispering, so he doesn't really hear me. But he walks up behind me, he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh my fucking. I've never been more scared in my life. But 2 minutes later, me and him are laying face down on the dirt road with our arms out, and I can feel like the curvature of the earth around my arms. And I'm just going like, Drew, we're just on a big rock that has gases attached to it because of gravity, and we get to live in that, and stuff grows in it. And this, like, all the stuff that you know once you take a good dose of like mushrooms or something, now you truly know it. Like, it's no longer just like, oh yeah, we live on a planet that's in space. You're like, do you know what that means?
Yeah.
That fucking some gases got trapped on this thing because of gravity, and now that's why we get to live. And some planets don't. The moon doesn't have it. That makes me, when I think about that that outer space just slams right up against the surface of the moon.
Yeah,
that freaks
crazy.
me out. That's like a weird thing to think about. But with that, going back to like the acid trip thing, so I'm laying there on the bed with my eyes closed, and I feel myself lift up so high that I open my eyes because I'm afraid I'm going to hit the ceiling. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't want to fucking bump the ceiling. So I open my eyes and realize I'm still down here. Whoa. And I stand up immediately and I'm like, Neil, I can't do this, man. I gotta move. I can't stay still. Because I felt like my entire body was just electrified. Like,
coursing with energy.
Yeah, just like energy is just pumping through me. Like, and mushrooms have never made me really feel like that. But like, it does make me feel like I gotta move my legs constantly when I have mushrooms. But this made me feel like you have to expend this energy, just like a ball of supercharged human.
Yeah.
So I get on my bike and I just start riding around the city. This is in the middle of August. I don't take any water with me or anything. For the next 5 hours, I'm just riding my bike in like 90-degree weather. I get so dehydrated. I get to I'm waiting for my weed fella at the time to call me, because I was like, he'll call me soon. I'll just start tripping now, and then I'll get green later, and I'll be good. That didn't happen for another 5 hours, so I just keep riding my bike around. And I stop at the ATM when I finally get a call from him. And I go up to it, and there's people behind me waiting, and like, I'm so like dehydrated and tired. My hands are shaking and my legs are shaking, and I'm like, I can barely move. And I get out my money, and I go to the dude's house. I sit down, there's all these people in the house hanging out with them, and I'm like, oh, I cannot handle it.
Sucks.
So I like walk in with eyes down, I sit down, and I turn to him, I'm like, hey man, what's up? Just like start making our transaction, and then I hear, Tyler? And I turn, and there's a guy I hadn't seen since middle school sitting there. This was probably when I'm like 21, so I hadn't seen this guy in like 8 years. And I turn and look at him, and I'm like, oh, hey man,
no.
I can't talk to you right now. And he goes, what? I'm like, I'm tripping on acid, I cannot talk to you right now, I'm sorry. And I turn, and he's like, okay. And I just turn away from him, I get my stuff, and I fucking jet. And I go back to my house. I'm finally starting to come down. I'd taken 2 tabs, and who, of course, knows how much is really on there. But for the next hour, I just sat in the shower and watched the water hit my arm hair and just watched how they were dancing around. And I was like, I wonder how much of this is me hallucinating and how much is like it
real.
Just really happened. And then I just got in my bed and covered myself with a blanket and just like fucking waited to fall asleep, which happened hours and hours later. But I remember, so I'd have that day to myself. I had told my girlfriend at the time that I was going to Charlottesville to help a friend move.
That's fucked up.
So I was like, I don't want you fucking bothering me about taking acid. I don't want you calling me. So I just told her I'm going to be...
Did she not indulge?
No, not at all. So she goes off, or, you know, like I go off by myself for the day. We were living in separate apartments and everything at the time. But I remember calling her as I was coming down, and I was staring out my window at the sunset, and I lied to her, pretending like I was still in Charlottesville. And I was like, we're just wrapping up the move, and I'm like barely able to even like stand at this point. I just want to fucking like, and I'm making up this ridiculous lie, and I was like, this relationship is not going well if you're at that point. But that whole day was just weird as shit. So that was 6 years ago, and I never tried it again.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Well, it was just such a weird like physical feeling. With mushrooms, I haven't had like too many negative feelings, unless there was this one time with Neil and that same ex-girlfriend. We ate a bunch, and then the first hour was amazing because we were coming up. Gotta burp again. Coming up on this huge dose, so I was like, this is the best trip ever. Like, I'm holding a broom at some point, and it feels like it's 20 feet long, and I'm like, how am I controlling this thing? I'm looking at posters on the wall, and like John Lennon is turning into like a gorilla holding a guitar, and I'm like, that's great, that's fucking fantastic. But then like hour 2 comes around, and it's like, oh
not
no,
so good.
Not so good. We all leave the apartment, and I have to go back to the apartment to get my jacket. And I look at the ground while I'm walking, and it felt like 2 minutes. So I was like, I must be back at our apartment door. I must have walked all the way down the hallway. I look up, and I've walked like 5 feet. I don't know how, like, I must have just
That's
been
weird.
like taking a step and stopping and being like, wow, I can't believe how hard I'm tripping. And like just taking another one. I felt like I'd been moving forever, but I barely moved at all. So I'm like, man, this is going to be a hardcore trip. I go get my jacket, come down the apartment steps, and there's the ex-girlfriend sitting on the floor with her hair in her hands, and she's going, you have to take me to the hospital right now. And I'm like, no, what? I don't. This was like her first trip and had way too fucking much for somebody that size and everything. So she's like, she's just freaking out. So I have to like put her upstairs and play Seinfeld for all of my Seinfeld disc for like 8 hours to just keep her mind occupied and my mind occupied. And I was like, that was like our anchor to the real world, being like, you know, Seinfeld comes on channel...
This is a TV show.
Seinfeld comes on channel 35 if we're watching the non-cable TV in the kitchen, and channel 5 if we're watching the cable TV in the living room. This is something I remember watching through the 90s every day after school. This is my anchor to reality. But that was like the first bad trip, just because it was so intense. If I closed my eyes, I was seeing like skeletons dancing around, which sounds cool, but it really wasn't. And if I open my eyes, it's just everything's too fucking crazy. So
I never really got too much into mushrooms. I mean, I've probably done it 4 or 5, 6 times maybe.
And that's probably... I've done it a few more times than that, I think.
It was more in high school.
Amount. Yeah.
But like after that, when I started going to festivals and stuff, we got really into LSD.
Yeah.
And that was...
What's the best experience on that you've had, you'd think?
I can't, like, pick one. I mean, just the general feeling, like, you get when you're around, like, hundreds of people on the same shit. It's just, like, a huge group of the same vibes, like...
Especially because so much of our society is uptight as fuck.
Yeah.
And
I feel sorry for people that haven't experienced something like that. It definitely opens your mind up.
It makes me feel like people that haven't done it, and this does sound so goddamn, kind of arrogant, but people that haven't had any of those experiences, especially people that have never even, like, smoked weed, I'm like, you don't know how it feels to feel connected to other people truly then. Like, and you might, like, your kids and stuff, but to have this feeling, like, so many people in our society are just so uptight about all that stuff that you can barely even talk about it. And one of the reasons that I like doing the podcast and just, like, throwing all this out there is I don't want to live the rest of my life being like, I have to think about what the boss might think if he hears it, or if my parents listen to this. Like, I think about that, be like, if my parents heard this, they probably wouldn't like it. I'm like, you're 27 years old, you can't fucking worry about that. You just have to, like, of course you don't want your family to think poorly of you, but you have to be honest about what you think is important to talk about. And I think that shit is. So, like you were saying, with feeling connected to people on the same wavelength as you.
Those are some of the best times, like being at a big music gathering with a bunch of other people on a bunch of different drugs. Like, I think I've only taken acid by itself, not including like smoking weed, a few times. Like when we were at festivals, it was always like a big mashup of a few drugs. Like we'd take acid, and then a couple hours into it, when we start tripping hard, we would eat a bunch of Molly or eat a bunch of ecstasy, and then, somewhere down the line, some cocaine would get involved, and of course smoking and drinking the whole time. So it was like...
I've never been able to mix drugs together. I get too scared of that, and especially, like, I don't ever want to drink alcohol while I'm tripping on anything. Really? Just because alcohol just makes me feel like, after a few drinks, it makes me feel physically just fucked up. Like, makes me feel kind of sick if I have more than like 3 beers. So I've seen people get like really drunk and then like eat some mushrooms. I'm like, I would just be puking within like 10 minutes.
But when you're in a big group like that, it's like everybody's trip kind of combines. Of course, you have your own individual experience, but it's kind of dulled down to a point.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, like...
Well, even just eating mushrooms by yourself versus eating mushrooms with, like, a good group of people. It's so much
more intense when you're doing it alone. That's why... We'll get into this, but that's why DMT is so incredible.
Yeah, that's what I'm fucking most interested in. Especially... I find it really fascinating, the idea that ayahuasca and smoking DMT are like such different experiences from what I've heard.
The first time I heard about that was on that podcast, on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it before, but he was talking with that fighter.
I don't think I heard that. Was it a recent one?
I don't know how long ago it was.
At some point.
But he was talking with this UFC guy. I guess he was UFC. He was a fighter of some sort. But he had just, I think he had just had like a medical problem and he wasn't going to be able to fight for a while, so he took a trip.
I can't remember the guy's name, but I know exactly who you're talking about.
And that was the first time I heard about it. I was like, dude, this is pretty awesome. I want to watch some more stuff about it.
Yeah.
Because the stuff he was saying was
it's fucking
ridiculous.
Incredible.
Like, that's the closest thing I can relate to a DMT trip. Like, you're completely...
It's not
in
like...
a different...
Yeah, it's not like mushrooms where it's like, this room looks different. It's like, you're in a different fucking dimension, right? That's the fucking feeling.
But, like, when you hear that, this is all, like, closed eye.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is all your mind seeing this. Like, I don't know if I want to get into it yet.
I think we should. Well, the stuff that's fascinated me the most about ayahuasca is, like, the idea... In Graham Hancock's book, God, I can't even remember what it's called. It might be right over here. I don't know. One of his books, he talks about...
Got some good books down there.
One of Graham Hancock's books, he talks about taking ayahuasca. He talks about taking iboga as well and all these different things. Iboga sounded scary as fuck, where he was like, basically I was in a shadowy room where corpses of my ancestors came up and told me all the stuff I'd fucked up on.
That's
like,
horrible.
Everything, but he was like, it was a great experience to, like, afterwards to be like, okay, now but they, at the end they were like, but now you're forgiven for all this shit, just own it. And he was like, okay. But the idea of, like, that sounds fascinating to me, but I would never do it because it's a 24-hour fucking experience.
That's like, peyote.
Is that supposed to last a really long time?
Yeah, it's like a full day of
I don't know
intense tripping. Like,
that's too much. I gotta, like, have a time where I know it's gonna end.
Yeah. I think the longest I've, like, actually, like, started the trip until you know you're coming down, you know that feeling like...
Yeah.
Oh, reality is starting to set back in. Was, like, probably 12 hours. And we had eaten a lot.
Mine's been about 8 or 9. Just a heavy dose of mushrooms. But but there's always been... Well, you know, it starts to do, like, the peak and valley thing. Where you're like, oh, I feel like I'm going back to normal. Then you're like, oh, my God.
It tricks you.
Indeed, it does. Especially if you smoke some weed, like, coming down.
Oh, yeah.
Might kick you right back in.
Yeah.
But... when he was talking about iboga, Graham Hancock, it made me imagine being in this, like, foggy, shadowy world and then having all of my, like, Irish and Scottish ancestors coming up to me, like, all with their decomposing corpses and, like, in these amazing accents telling me all this shit. I'm like, that doesn't sound too bad as long as I don't completely lose my mind. But the way he describes ayahuasca is... actually, I don't think it was him. It was Aubrey Marcus on Joe Rogan's podcast. This is the first time I had heard about DMT or ayahuasca. Aubrey Marcus was talking about going down to South America and doing it, and how the first thing that happened was that he called it a flotilla, which is just like a floating thing, comes at him. It's like a word for ships, I think. I'm going to sound stupid if that's not what it is. But it's like, so this floating thing made of snakes comes up to him. You know, of course, like you said, this is all eyes closed. Mm-hmm. This isn't like... He's not sitting in the jungle hallucinating these things. He's actually, like, in a shack in the jungle, but he thinks he's out in the actual jungle. And a floating raft of snakes comes up to him. There's snakes always in this ayahuasca stuff, but it's never, like, threatening, they say, which would be tough for me, because I'm very threatened by snakes. I fucking hate them. I get so freaked out. I'm better about it now, but when I was a kid, I couldn't even see them on TV without freaking out and just changing the channel as fast as I could. Me. Oh, really? Spiders don't bother me so much, but I had a really funny moment yesterday where I mean, it's kind of sad as well in my opinion, but I saved a spider in the house and took him outside to save him, like just put him outside, and on the way, another spider scurried in front of me, and not to make you worry that there's a lot of spiders in the house, but... he scurried in front of me, and I was like, oh, shit, I can't get them both. So I was like, step on that one. I was like, kill this one, save this one. Equal out karma. Balance out this karma. I saved the younger one, the smaller one. So this floating thing of snakes comes up to him and invites him to get on it, and then it takes him on like a tour of the jungle, drops him off at one point where he's talking to a bear that's wearing all these gold chains and a gold crown, and the bear tells him like, you know, I traded my freedom for all this gold. Basically this, you know, a message of like, don't work in a fucking office your whole life and trade away your life for shit you don't like doing just for money. Like, and you know, so this bear covered in all this gold is telling him like, I used to be free. And then an eagle swoops down, no, it's a big dragon swoops down and picks him up and takes him over the landscape. And anything that Aubrey Marcus told the dragon to destroy, the dragon would swoop down and like burn it up.
That's the guy I was talking about.
Oh.
Was he not a fighter?
Well, I think he might do like jujitsu and stuff, but I don't think
Maybe
he's
that
like
was it.
I don't think, yeah, he's like not a UFC fighter or anything, but just, yeah, like, and the dragon is like, what do you want to destroy? And he's like, ignorance. Shouldn't that be what you want to heal? He's like, you're right, dragon. So that sounds amazing to me. And Graham Hancock, the way he talked about it was like, he's in this room and there's like, at first, the first few times he did it, the only thing that happened was that he was like in this white room where geometric shapes would like come speak to him and like disappear and like show him cool stuff. But he was like, took ayahuasca for like the 4th time on that trip. And then a huge snake appeared and each one of its scales was a little spiral galaxy. And he just knew that what he was supposed to do was come up and open up a scale and walk through it. So he went up and opened up a scale like a door, and it was like just blackness, and he crawled through it, and it took him into like the fucking jungle full of snakes telling him all this wise shit. I should probably read. I'll like add an excerpt at the end with like from the book. It's amazing. Like, because I know that DMT must be amazing, but then that next level of that must be fucking incredible.
It gets so intense, like in a good way. It's so hard to, like, I wish I could draw a picture of, like, my most intense DMT trip.
Yeah.
It is totally out of this world. Like, I've never tripped like that, ever.
What does it feel like? Like, go through from the start, like, what it feels like physically, and then mentally.
It all comes on, like, pretty quickly. Like, I've done it probably 7 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the bulk of those, I've probably done it twice, like, at a show.
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't the same. But the bulk of the times were right when I got off work. It's probably, like, around 4 in the afternoon. This was all when I lived off of, Robius.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in our own house. I'd put on some really, like, trippy music by, like, Spangle or something.
Uh-huh. What a great name.
Put my headphones on and, like, crank it up, and then I always took GBs of it. But, I would always take just a couple. Like,
whenever I've smoked any hallucinogens, I always do GBs of it, so it was like the big fucking...
Yeah. Like, I'd take one, hold it while I pulled the next one.
That's good, yeah.
Blow it out, take the next.
Did you just take those 2, or did you have to take multiple?
My most intense one I took, I think I got like halfway through my 4th GB
Mm-hmm.
before I was like, no, I need to stop. But I would lay down like with my headphones on still on my bed because my computer table was right next to my bed pretty much. And I just like fall back on my bed with my eyes closed and just let it happen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't have any choice at that point.
Yeah. So I would get comfortable and just let the song like take me through this crazy journey.
So are you still like connected to the physical world at all? Like, do you know at this point that you're laying in your bed, or does that disappear?
Depending on if your eyes are open or closed, yes. When your eyes are closed, you're totally in a different reality.
And it's easy to just like get totally lost in that, kind of forget that it's... Yeah.
Because you're seeing all this intense, awesome stuff. Like, especially the first time it happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, like, mind-blowing. It's so awesome.
What is it like? I've heard people describe... Did you have, like, the auditory thing where it's like that womp, 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 womp? I've heard people say that they get that sort of, like... When I took nitrous in high school at Beach Week, that's what it did to me. Like, everything sounded really, like,
that
echoey.
Weird
like,
vibrating.
Yeah, weird vibrating. So that's
noise.
what I've heard happens with DMT as well, like, right when you smoke it.
I
didn't have that?
Maybe. I don't know.
Too much other stuff going on at that point?
Yeah, like, you don't really pay attention to small stuff unless it, like,
well, maybe because you
itself.
had music going on, too. Like, you didn't...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would always have it just blasting in my headphones.
So what is it like visually? Is it... When I've had closed eye visuals for just a few times on mushrooms, it's been like where I see like darkness and then kind of shapes of light start doing stuff. Is it like that, or is it like you're seeing something totally different? You're like visually...
It really depends on how much you...
Is it almost like a dream going on in your mind?
Yeah, it's like... It's a dream, really.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, like, that's, like, what it's supposed to do. It's like an awake dream.
That's amazing.
But mostly it's, like, just what you're thinking about, you can kind of, like, make appear.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple of the times, the first couple times was, like, darkness, like, you just have your eyes closed, and you see just, like, light and kind of invisible little shapes kind of coming into view.
Is there, like, any... What do the shapes do? As like, do they stick around, or is it, like, one after another just blasting through? Because I've heard people talk about, like, crazy geometric shapes coming up to them, sticking in front of them, and, like, talking to them for a while. Do you ever have anything where it's, like...
It depends on... I think because I always had music playing, they would kind of, like...
Go along with that.
Vibrate and go along with the music. And it was always, like, really trippy, like, jungle noises and stuff like that.
With, in Graham Hancock's book, he talked about that was, like, that... With the first few ayahuasca sessions, it was, like, an extended... He had smoked DMT, so he knew that realm of, like, this... Well, as he described it, as, like, a white area where shapes would come up to him and, like, either... I think he said they never really spoke to him. Like, sometimes there were, like, songs that they would kind of vibrate. But it was never, like... Joe Rogan is the one that described one coming up to him, like, thousands of cubes that were shifting, and they would sing songs to him, and, like, about how much they loved him. And then, like, as he came down, they were like, we'll talk to you soon.
See you later.
And that sounded amazing, but I think Graham Hancock was more like, just like you said, these shapes and everything. And then, so for the first few times with ayahuasca, he said he was kind of disappointed because it wasn't more than that, because he was used to that already. And he said, but he was like, so he considered that the, like, waiting room of ayahuasca. Like, he had to prove himself almost, of, like, you know, doing it over and over again, and they're like, alright, you keep coming back if you really want to fucking see some shit. If you really want to see some shit, you can climb through the giant snake behind you. And he's like, what giant snake behind? Oh my god! Which is just, you know, the idea of that being extended for, like, 5 hours as opposed to just, like, a, 15-20 minute trip?
Not even.
Not in, like, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the crazy thing about it. Like, I'd get home from work, like, before I even took a shower or anything, I would do it. And it wouldn't even be...
Like 4:30 before it's all over.
Yeah, it wouldn't even be 30 minutes before I was, like, all the way down. Like, that was the most incredible thing I've ever experienced in my life. But it's time to take a shower because I'm fucking dirty and smelly.
Man.
But
how crazy is it that so many people would never even consider doing that? Like, even...
The first time I did it, like...
It makes you realize that reality is not at all what we fucking think it is. Because
No.
we're so limited with our ability to even sense a lot of the stuff in the world around us. Like, we can't sense electromagnetic fields with our bodies and shit. All that sort of stuff. And when I get in... Like, I don't really consider myself an atheist, more an agnostic, because I have no fucking clue what reality is. And I don't really want to claim one way or another anything. And I'm not sure if it's, like... I don't think it has anything to do with God necessarily, and I sometimes think the universe might be a simulation completely.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, it's like I don't know what's going on, but I just want to keep exploring shit and see like how much I can blow my mind. But there's like, there's a whole lot of the people in this world that have. I do feel sorry for them, like you said, because they don't have any idea that there's this other fucking place.
And they have no like desire
to experience it.
Yeah, like how can you not want something like that?
At this point, it's almost like the difference of the sort of people, and this is going to sound arrogant again, but there were the people that were like, oh, there's the new world, like I'm going to go explore and see what the fuck is out there and like start a new life there. And there were people that were like, I would never get on a boat and go across the ocean to North America, like fuck that. And, it's too scary. And of course, it's much easier to take a hallucinogen and 8 hours later you're fine, as opposed to get on a boat and go across the ocean.
A couple years later.
Like 3 months later you show up, and if you survive, good for you. But it's that in this dulled down world that we have now, where none of us, well, at least in like the Western, like in our American world, there's not a whole lot of like physical danger you're facing. So. Yeah. The danger really comes from like stepping outside of the box of what society expects of you, because you can get in trouble for just talking about doing this sort of stuff, or for doing it you can get in huge fucking trouble for having these substances, which is ridiculous, because nobody and like when you do this stuff you realize like, oh, nobody has the right to tell me I can't do this stuff, but everybody acts like they fucking do have the right to tell me not to do this stuff. And it gets really... It makes me feel kind of bogged down sometimes. But I feel like things are getting better. That people are... Like, most of the people that I'm friends with have done mushrooms or some form of, hallucinogens. Most of them, like, a whole lot. And I don't think that's true for, like, my parents' generation. So
it depends on what generation. Like, my parents... they were all into, like, the Grateful Dead scene.
Uh-huh.
So...
My parents were not at all, so they have never done anything like that.
I've been able to share my LSD experiences with my parents.
That's much better than, like, having to hide it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, that's not something you want to hide. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I know. I want to be able to talk about it, but I don't think I could ever bring it up. One time in high school, my brother made a joke that I was going out on a camping trip with my friend Kyle because we were looking for mushrooms, and my mom started freaking out as if she had found mushrooms like in my pocket, and I was like, it's a fucking joke, and my brother had to be like, they're not doing that, calm down. But she like immediately started yelling like, if you're doing that, I'm sending you to rehab. And I'm like, Jesus. Wow. This was a time in high school where we would get in huge fights. They hadn't given up on trying to get me off of weed yet, so there was still like I'd get caught with it and I'd get grounded.
Off of weed.
Yeah, and like, they'd catch me with it and ground me for a week or two, and there'd big lecture about how they can never trust me again.
Yeah.
And then if my parents listen to this, my mom is going to be upset about this part. My dad, as soon as my mom would leave the house after the big lecture, my dad would come in and be like, I'm really sorry, buddy. I didn't mean what I said. I was just like you in high school and college. It's okay. It's not a... people smoke weed all the time. The only difference between you and me is you got caught a bunch. Like, and then, but like 30 minutes before that, he's in the living room with my mom going, we cannot trust you ever again. And then, I'm sorry, buddy.
Gotta be a parent.
I don't mean it at all. And there's another... This has happened over and over again. My mom never really hears about these. But a friend down the street, I used to go get high with him on the golf course at like 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, like a school night. We'd make plans at like 10 o'clock at night, through our instant messenger, and then be like, all right, at 1:30 I'm going to meet you at the end of your driveway.
I'll meet you at the gate.
Yeah, so I'd go down. Only like twice did he not show up. Like, we were pretty good about doing this. And it was back when weed was like new enough in my life where it was really exciting to do it. Like, every time was exhilarating. So we'd go smoke on the golf course, and one day I get to school, and this other guy who's who's a mutual friend, he smiles at me when I walk in biology, and he's like, you're fucked, man. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, other dude's mom read his instant messenger and saw what you guys did last night, and you have to go over to her house tonight and apologize, or she's going to tell your mom. So I was like, I'll take that over getting in trouble, like with my parents. So after school, I have to go over to their house, and she gives me this mom lecture about weed. Not even my own mom.
What?
Somebody else's mom giving me this lecture, and she's like, you know, it got crazy pretty quickly. She was like, you know, when I was messing around with my friends in the 70s and 80s, we did a lot of cocaine. And you think I'm proud of that? You think that helped me with my life? I'm like, I'm just smoking weed.
Yeah.
And the thing that she said, that I almost laughed in her face when she said this, because it was such a weird thing to say. She's like, I know that you're in a rock band. And I was like, well, I do play music with my friends in the garage sometimes, but I know you're in a rock band. And, you know, marijuana and cocaine and all these other drugs and rock and roll, they go hand in hand. I'm like, is this 1978? Like, you giving me this lecture about how the dangers of rock and roll? So she's like, if I so much as see you smoking a joint walking down the street, I'll call your mom. I'm like, why you put it like that? As if like smoking a joint is like a lesser way of smoking weed.
Yeah.
It's like, if I so much as see a joint, I'm like, that's just as much weed as anything else. But so she gives me this lecture, and I apologize, and she's like, all right, I'm not going to tell your mom. You better get out of here before, this dude's dad gets home, because he had not been told about it. So I skedaddled back down the street to my house, and months later, my mom finds a cooler that belonged to this kid that I smoked weed with, like in the woods beside our house, and it was filled with liquor, and it had his name on the outside of the fucking thing. So she called, I'm sitting there at the kitchen table as my mom calls this guy's mom. And I almost burst into laughter sitting at the table when I heard this, because she was like, I found this cooler in the woods, I'm going to call his mom. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh God. She calls his mom, and at one point she goes, you know, us moms, we got to stick together. And when we find stuff like this, we got to tell each other like that. And I wanted to laugh so hard. Like, you're talking to a woman that let me off the hook, like, fucking just a few months ago. So she never did
tell your mom?
Never fucking told my mom. Cool as shit that she just
cool.
was like, as long as you apologize for this, I'm not going to tell your parents. I hope I'm a parent like that, where I'm like...
That's so weird to think about. Like, I do not want kids.
Like, at all.
That opinion might change later, but...
I do, but not like soon. And if it did happen at this point, it wouldn't be like the worst thing in the world, especially if it was somebody that I thought was cool. If it was somebody I could imagine
I just can't
being with.
Imagine that yet. Like, financial situation.
Oh yeah, that's a big fucking part of it.
And we're still young. Like,
yeah, definitely.
There's so much more to do without having to worry about this little human that you must take care of or it'll die.
Yeah, there is a lot I want to do before I have like settled down with the family, but I feel like if it did happen, I could find a way to still do stuff I wanted to do.
People still do, but...
When I was like 22 or 20, if that had happened, it would have been fucking devastating.
Yeah.
At this point, I could fucking deal with it. But it's still not something I'm like trying to get done right now. But
the thought of having something like that you have to worry about all the time.
Yeah. It's just crazy.
It's intense.
It is fucking intense. And it's not like a dog where if you...
Yeah.
you're like, I forgot to buy dog food.
Yeah, I forgot to feed it.
I'll feed you
tonight.
in the morning. Like, I'll go first thing in the morning and get you food. I'm sorry. Like, you can't do that. When people... I mean, this might be my ignorance as a person with no kids, I guess. But... one time I heard them talking on the radio about a woman that had left her kid in the car as she ran inside to, like, drop something off in the post office. And the kid was in the car for, like, 30 seconds, but she got in trouble for it. And they were talking about it like she had fucked up. And I was like, you can't leave a kid in the car for a few minutes? Or, like, another story I heard where a woman got in trouble because she had gone to a neighbor's house and left her baby in the house by itself. And I was like, the baby's not going to die in 2 minutes. Like, just fucking... But that's the sort of, like, intense... pressure you have on yourself.
It's like every minute.
Every fucking minute to do that. How did we get off on babies?
I don't know. Something went astray.
But I don't know if I'll ever have the opportunity or the will to do something like ayahuasca to go that deep. But like DMT definitely seems like something that would be interesting to do.
And there's like other hallucinogens. It's not a...
I have a pretty narrow view of like...
Have you ever done ketamine?
No. What's that like?
It's so great. It's a...
I've only heard bad stuff about it, so what's
It's a tranquilizer.
Yeah.
So, pretty much, it depends on how much you take.
Mm-hmm.
But to a certain point...
That's my phone going.
To a certain point, it's just... It's like being physically really drunk, but your mind is clear. It's weird. Like, your movement is all like you're wasted drunk.
That seems to me like it would not be enjoyable. Like, not having control over... How long does it last? Like, a few hours? Or is it a pretty, like, quick experience?
An hour-ish, then it starts to kind of wear off.
Mm-hmm.
That's if you do a little bit. But if you start getting into doing, like, above that threshold for for whoever you are, it starts to get pretty intense. Like, they call it the K-hole.
I was going to say, like, what exactly is the K-hole?
That's, like, it turns into, like, a hallucinogen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people explain it as, like, you're just stuck in the hole. You're really, like, stuck. Like, it confuses your mind so much.
Like, what does it feel like exactly? Like, you just can't move your physical body at all? Or you can't... Or is it, like, just totally indescribable?
It's really hard to explain. I guess the biggest... It's a tranquilizer, so you're pretty much, like... You're not literally, like, can't move.
Yeah.
But your brain is just, like... You just don't move yet.
It just reminded me of the...
Yeah, like, your muscles aren't working very well right now, so...
What movie is it where Will Ferrell takes a tranquilizer dart to the neck?
Yeah.
It's like... What movie is that?
It's...
Old School?
Yes.
Yeah,
I think.
Maybe. I think it is.
I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's fucking
But it's like... It's so hard. I wish I could explain it better, but it can be visual, and it's definitely a mental hallucination, pretty intense. That is pretty intense. Like, it's just another form of hallucinating, I guess.
What was the other one I was just going to mention?
What else have we done?
Did you mention mescaline earlier? Well, you mentioned peyote, and I think that's mescaline, right?
I don't know if they're the same. It might be.
I'm not really sure. Like, I'm not really sure. I've heard some about that, but I don't really know what it does to you.
Yeah, I've never been able to get it.
I've
seen it, like, sold at festivals, but you never know, like...
I always wonder about the people that go to festivals with all this stuff to sell. Like, it's such a risk to, like, go... Like, just if you get pulled over on the way, or, like, I feel like there'd be cops, like, just waiting to pull people over where they know they're on the way to that sort of stuff.
Especially at, like, All Good, when it was starting to get towards the later years of it.
And I know, I've heard of somebody that we both know that went to a festival and apparently, like, passed out and woke up and all their shit had been stolen. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
No.
I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
That's another risk.
There's definitely bad people at these places. And, and people do act stupid.
Anytime you have thousands of people together, there's going to be...
People act stupid and do too many drugs, like...
Yeah, you gotta know what the fuck you're doing. Just,
either way.
Take it easy with that stuff. But what about... you have experience with salvia?
I don't like that.
Isn't it weird as shit? It feels fucking strange as hell.
It is. I've had one... When I was in high school, a friend of mine bought, like, a bunch of the extract.
Mm-hmm.
And, we did it probably a few times, but it just weirded me out super hard.
I've done it 4 times, I think. The first 2 were pretty cool. And do you know who Ari Shaffir is? He's on Joe Rogan's podcast sometime. He's a comedian in LA. And he had the coolest story I've ever heard about it. Where it wasn't just like... He smoked so much of it in one go, like, I don't know if it was GBs or what, but he took a, like, really high, you know how they have, like, 5X, 10X, 20X? It was, like, a high X, whatever. And smoked a bunch, and for, like, 15 minutes, he was just sitting there, like, mumbling to himself. And his friends, like, couldn't get him to, like, respond to anything.
Yeah.
But in his mind, he said that he had 3 months of living in a cloud city in the future, and he had a house with a wife and a weird, like, future dog and friends that he would have dinner with, and that it was 3 months of going through his daily life. And this, like, that sounds... And this is a guy that is not a bullshitter at all. Like, there's no way, I don't believe that this guy would make up this story at all. Like, he has a really good podcast called The Skeptic Tank. So it's like, he's really a pretty reliable guy with this sort of stuff. He talks about mushrooms all the time. He runs Mushroom Fest, where it's like people all over the world are supposed to take mushrooms, same time, same day, like all over the world. And, or Shroom Fest, I think it's called. So for months, he said, he took such a heavy dose that I've heard people say they have really crazy hallucinations when they take a whole lot of it. But for him, it was, week after week of, like, going out with his friends and spending time with his wife and his dog, taking the dog on walks. And then he woke up and he was back in his living room with his friends, and all he could do for days was just feel depressed because he missed his dog and he missed his wife and his friends and his city in the clouds in the future. And he was like, I might be messing up the story. I've never heard him tell it specifically. I've just heard so many other podcasters talking about it, so I'd like know his story about it. But so this is, secondhand and everything. But that sounds amazing. But the first time I did it, the first 2 times I did it, I enjoyed it because it was so strange. I was at Matt's house. I'm going to pause this for a second. Okay, I had to clarify which Matt. I was at Matt's house, and he had I don't know if you were ever over there, but he had his bunk bed, and then he had a sheet that went around the bottom of it, so the bottom of the bunk bed, there's no bed down there, it's a loft bed. So it was like a tent under there. Mm-hmm. And so I take 2 GBs of like the 20X, and I think that I'm in a tent in the woods. I can hear birds chirping, and I can see the sun shining through, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, let's go out and play in the grass. And I open the tent, and I see that I'm in his room, and I'm like, what the fuck? And then it's over. Trip is over in 20 seconds. So a few hours later, we do it again, and this time I'm walking around his room, and I'm like, can you hear that? Can you fucking hear that? There's a parade out there. And I think that his bedroom is like a little apartment, and that right outside of the door is the street, and that there's fucking a parade going. I can hear people cheering, and I can hear the clash of like cymbals and shit of the band coming by and trumpets. A total like auditory hallucination here. I fling open the door, and it's just a dark hallway, and just like that, trip's
done.
Over. Just like that, trip is done. And I go, what the fuck was I just saying? The third time, all I did was get really hot, took off my jacket, shirt, hat, then got really cold, put it back on, and then the trip was over. But the best one I've heard about salvia was my friend Grant. Do you remember Grant? Mm-hmm. He smoked it by himself in his bathroom at his mom's house in high school, and like blowing it out the window. Then he sat down on the toilet and was staring at the shower curtain in front of him, and he closed his eyes and said that he suddenly thought that he was the shower curtain, that his body had replaced the shower curtain, and that his skin was all stretched out, and that he was like, oh no, my mom's going to come in here and see that I've become the shower curtain. How am I going to explain that? I'm going to have to tell her that I smoked salvia and became the shower curtain. And he said that he was just starting to really panic about this when, boom, trips over. Like, that's insane. Especially that they sell it at, like, Africa House.
Yeah. I can't remember the first couple times, but the one that, like, really got me off of it, the same friend who bought, it was one of the highest ones you could get, like an extract. They were like little pellets, I think.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Like little, like, seed-looking pellets.
Like, you eat them? Or
no,
what?
You smoke them.
Smoke them.
But, like, most salvia is the grassy.
Yeah, it was just kind of like imitation weed is kind of what it is.
Yeah, but this was like the extract was always like pellets. Mm-hmm. And it was the last time I ever did it. We were at this friend's house. It was just me and him in his room. Nobody else was home. Like, we skipped school and went to his house.
Nice.
And started doing drugs. He was in one part of the room. He just smoked his, so he was off. And I was laying down on his bed, and I smoked mine. And, like, I think it was 20, 30 seconds later, like, I hear his parents, like, running up the stairs, like, yelling at us. I was like, shit, Kevin, we gotta leave. Like, this is bad. We gotta go. I started just freaking out. And I went and opened the door, and like you were saying, it's just over.
Yeah, nobody there?
It was the most scared, like, I've ever been in in a trip.
But you totally hallucinated them yelling and everything. Like
yeah, nobody else was home.
Yeah, nobody was there.
There wasn't any animals. Like I heard running upstairs, and his parents,
insane.
like his parents' voices, like
yeah,
they're yelling at us. Like,
yeah, it's
angry
so crazy.
yelling.
I'm glad you've had also the auditory thing, so you believe the whole like.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, you did not hear a band playing. I'm like, I fucking did.
It was scary as shit, dude. But it just ended when I opened the door, and it's like I don't want to do any more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too nuts. It feels weird as shit. So, yeah, like I think it's illegal in Virginia now. I don't even think you can buy it anymore. But I was surprised when I first did it. Like, you can trip this hard. I mean, it's real short. Because I've only smoked a little bit, like strong enough to make me hallucinate, but only for, 10, 20 seconds.
Yeah.
But it's pretty damn crazy. Well, you want to wrap it up? I think we got like an hour's worth of stuff. I don't know if people will listen past that. One more thing?
My most intense DMT trip.
Oh, okay, yeah. I want to hear about that.
So have you ever listened to Joe Rogan's, like, explanation of how a DMT trip is?
Are we still recording? Let me make sure before you say that. Yep, still recording. Yeah, I've heard him talk about it.
What's, like, the really intense ones, it's like, you're kind of being born into another world. Like, you get squeezed, is that a word? Squeezed?
Yeah.
Squeezed through a hole. And I was in...
Do you feel like pressure on your body and shit? Like you're literally getting...
It was like you're getting just, like, toothpaste through a tube into this alternate world.
Oh, man, that sounds great.
And I was listening... This was the one where I took... Well, I almost got to 4 GBs. But it had taken too long to... I just dropped, like, the last 5/8 of the GB because I was starting to get all wobbly. And that's the only way I can explain it, but I had the song DMT by Spangle, and it was timed, like, perfectly. The song was so perfect. There was a build-up, and then, like, an intense, trippy middle part, and then there's a come-down at the end. And it was like a 12-minute song, I think.
Probably planned that.
It's totally planned. Like, if you've ever... You need to listen to some of their music. It's really, like, trippy, like, made for hallucinations. But, I laid down, closed my eyes, and the song started to ramp up. And it was probably... I don't know the time period, but probably, like, a minute into it. Like, it was just a total... completely different reality. And I was born into this, I call it the bubble world.
Nice.
I got spit through the wall of this thing, and it was probably, it looked like a few miles in diameter, but it was a total, like, circular bubble, and everything in it was, like, opaque colored bubbles. Like balloon, like, opaque colors. A few miles in distance to the other side, just a complete circle. And in the middle there are these, like...
So it's a big circle that you're in, and then there's a bunch of smaller ones, like, floating around?
No, like, the walls and the structures inside of this thing...
Oh, I gotcha.
Were all, like the walls of it were bubble.
Gotcha.
And in the middle, or, like, kind of spread out, there are these big, like, hourglass-looking towers that went from the ceiling to the roof, and there are these big nasty, like, stairs coming down from the middle going into these places. I can kind of relate it to, like, something out of Lord of the Rings or something, like a nasty looking awesome tower made out of opaque colored bubbles.
Sounds fantastic.
And I was kind of just, like, flying around the place, like, literally just, like, flying Superman style, just checking out these towers, and just seeing this stuff was the most ridiculous thing I've ever
Did it feel totally real?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I was running my hand across the walls as I was flying around, like, just, like, the depth perception.
And it's not like you're having flashes of this. This is a continual experience.
Yeah, a continual, like, 10-minute experience. But in the middle of it, I was like, I remembered that I'm laying on my bed, And I've always wanted to see, like, what an open-eyed experience of this would be like when I'm tripping this hard. Like,
yeah.
I knew I wanted to, like, really see something this time, so that's why I tried to take as much as I could.
Yeah.
So I opened my eyes. I knew I was laying on my bed the whole time. Like, in the back of my head, I was like, this is all closed. Like, I know what I'm doing. I opened my eyes, and it was just like, how can I explain it? It's kind of like looking through 3D glasses. You know, there's that weird, like, different colored.
It's like everything's kind of double.
And and I looked up, and everything was that. Like, everything in my room, my vision was like 3D glasses.
Man.
And I waved my hand across my face like that. Like, there's just thousands of copies of my hand in slow motion. It's like, that's a little too much. I'm going back to Bubble World. I closed my eyes, and it was like a pause. I unpaused it, and I kept flying around these towers and stuff.
I unpaused it, that's great.
And then the song started coming down. And it was something, my mind just thought, like, all right, it's time to leave this place. So I went right to where I came in at. And I kind of just flew back out of it. And then I opened my eyes again, and I wasn't getting as much of the...
Still there, but not so hardcore.
And I was just laying in my bed, just coming down. The song was ending.
Yeah.
It was perfect. The best hallucination, best tripping experience I've ever had.
Like, do you feel like... I almost feel like because we have so little sense of what reality is, that when you do something like that, that you are maybe, and of course I have no fucking idea, but maybe experiencing some other dimension that is real. Like, you're not just... Your mind isn't just making up some crazy shit. Because so many people have similar experiences with, like, DMT and especially ayahuasca. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense that all these different people take ayahuasca and see a humongous snake that they go through, or the flotilla of snakes.
It's hard to try and think about. Like, I've never had something, like, come up and speak to me.
Yeah.
With any drug experience. And I've kind of, like, wanted that.
Yeah.
But I think because of my beliefs, like, I guess people would call me an atheist, but I think atheism is just not dealing, like, I don't do religion.
Yeah.
I think all religion is fucked.
I think I think so many people have different, definitions of what their atheism means. It's hard.
I think there's different levels of atheism.
It's something you can't just put into one word like that either. Like, I'm an atheist, and then so many people have so many different versions of what that means, or what agnostic means. Or some people that identify as Christian, believe something completely fucking
different. And I think
different.
that's when, I think you see, like, what you honestly feel in your mind. Like, if you're afraid that there might be some God or something, you might, it might appear in something.
Oh, yeah. Well, like, just the fact that, when I've heard physicists talk about how atoms can blink out of existence in this realm and then blink back into existence and they don't know where the fuck they went.
Yeah.
I'm like, and, the whole multiverse theory and everything. The idea that there are these different dimensions that matter can exist in, and one so different from the other, that, it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility that, like, you somehow tap into this other stuff when... Well, what's interesting is, like, they say that when you take mushrooms, your brain doesn't become more active, it becomes less active, almost like your filter is calming down and letting more stuff in. Like, I
wish I knew, like, how it really affected your brain, like, what's happening.
I don't really
know. I know this drug is, like, flooding your brain.
Well, there's DMT in, like, basically everything that we eat, and there's DMT in your body all the time, but there's just the stuff that keeps you from...
I think that's what people...
I forget what it's called.
Like, when people who like, die and come back, like, get revived, I think what they see is what they believe, because there's a shitload of DMT just pouring into their brain.
Pouring into their brain.
They're having an intense trip.
And, some people say... I told that to my dad once, and he was like, well, that makes me kind of sad to know, because then that's, like... that realm isn't real then. I'm like, I don't really see it that way. I see it as like, that's part of our reality, and that is kind of miraculous if you want to use that word. And like, screw the idea of a Christian or a Jewish or Muslim God or anything like that doing this miracle. It's just reality is so goddamn crazy, fascinating. We should, like, to me, just this existence, the universe, is what we should be. If you're going to worship anything, it should just be the earth and the universe. Yeah. And that's enough religion for me, if you want to call it that. There needs to be another word for it, because it's not really a religion in the classical sense. It's just like...
a belief.
A belief that... I get so offended at people that don't give a shit about polluting the earth, because I'm like, this thing is way holier than you, motherfucker. Yeah. And any god that you claim to fucking worship on Sunday. Like, this thing is amazing, the fact that it exists.
The thought of... Probably going to piss some people off, but the thought of Christianity or one of these newer religions...
the newer a religion is...
ridiculous.
The newer a religion is, the less you can pay attention to it, really, it seems.
And the story of Jesus and all of that has been repeated by... the story of Christianity was a repeat of, I think it's 4 or 5 different ancient religions.
Yeah, so many different things put together.
We'll save that one for another podcast.
Well, I think...
It's...
Have you ever heard of the sacred mushroom and the cross? The idea that there was this Christian scholar, John Marco Allegro. Joe Rogan talks about him. I bring that podcast up so much I feel like a cult member sometimes. I'm like, Joe Rogan said that. But it's fascinating shit that he talks about. And this guy, John Marco Allegro, was a very respected Christian scholar. I mean, neither one of us knows much about this, so we'll save it. We should research it both and then talk about it another time. But the idea was that when he went back and read the ancient, like, Aramaic text and everything, or the Hebrew text, whatever it was, the Greek text about the New Testament, Christianity was it was like a Jewish cult based on the idea of eating magic mushrooms and having mating rituals. And that it was put into all these different stories because they were trying to hide it from, like, the Romans and other enemies. Like, they didn't want to have this sacred knowledge that they had from mushrooms, just like other cultures throughout history, like especially Hindus have taken massive amounts of hallucinogens, and that's where they get so many of their beliefs and gods and everything. So, god damn it, where was I going with all that? What was I talking about? Totally got lost. Oh, but okay, so his stuff is all about early Christianity being a cult based off of, Jewish cult based off of tripping and mating rituals. And, like, supposedly this book has been proved so fucking true with so many different things he brought up that a lot of honest Christian scholars are like, well, we kind of have to admit there's something to this. I mean, I'm not going to say that it means that that's what Christianity is about, but it seems there was some mushroom use perhaps. And I'm like, that book is out of print now because the people that were printing it was such a controversy that the people that were printing it just stopped. But now it's finally getting printed again, so we should both try to get our hands on a copy.
Yeah, we'll get into the whole religion thing.
Yeah.
A different one.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks a lot for talking to me about that stuff. I especially wanted to know a lot about DMT, and you told a great story with the bubble thing. That's what I wanted to know about. That sort of shit.
I hope you get to experience it one day.
Yeah, definitely. I got to be mentally prepared for that. All right, man. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone, for listening.